Can you imagine that leadership is not always what you think it is? We often imagine leaders as these flawless, polished icons who have all the answers. But here's the real deal. Leadership is messy. It can be raw and is profoundly human. And that's exactly what we're diving into on Leadership Plus with Dr. G. I'm not interested in bringing you the buzzwords and the theory, but I want to get down to the core and heart of what it takes to lead. So whether you're navigating challenges, building your team, or refining your vision, this is your space to grow and thrive as a leader. Now let's jump in. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Shernette Grant, and welcome to Leadership Plus with Dr. G, the podcast where we keep it real about what it takes to lead, inspire, and grow others to being their very best. I am your host, and I am so delighted that you joined me today. Today we're going to be talking about what is truly a leader. What does it take to be a leader? Oftentimes we talk about leadership and we attach it to positions or titles. And while, yes, a CEO, a president, a principal, a VP, you name it, is a leader, it does not necessarily mean that the individual is exhibiting traits of a leader. So let's think about that and dive into that just for a minute. So again, if you are just joining me, grab your coffee, grab your tea, or whatever it is that fuels your greatness, and tune in. Let's go ahead and flip the script today and talk about what it truly means to be a leader. So I'm sure your first thing is like, Dr. Grant, of course, it's my boss, it's my CEO, it's me. But my question to you is, do you have influence? What kind of influence do you have over the people that you lead? Are you getting things done because people are willing to walk through brick walls just for you? Are you getting things done because people are willing to work towards the goals of the organizations because you have found a way to motivate, inspire, and collaborate with your team where you are just doing amazing things? Or are you struggling? I know at some points in time, we all struggle. Like, we know this. We all struggle. But today we're going to dive into this real idea that a leader is not necessarily someone who has a position or a title, and while it should be synonymous, sometimes it just turns out that the true leader is not the one who has the characteristics to create influence, which means creating impact, which means getting the work done, motivating people, and all of the above, right? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And getting started, we are going to go back into we're going to use a little childhood fable, fairy tale to illustrate some of what I'm going to be talking about today. How many of you remember the Pied Piper story? The Pied Piper of Hamelin? If you remember that, drop a yes in the chat. Was that one of your favorite stories as a child? I remember the Pied Piper. It's one of the few stories that sticks with me, and maybe it's because I saw the influence that the Pied Piper had from very early on. I don't know, maybe as a child I could see it, but it's one of my favorite stories, and I like to call myself the Pied Piper. So I'm going to today, so bear with me, right? We're going to be looking at leadership through the lens of the Pied Piper, and we're going to be reading that story. So you snuggled up, you got your coffee, you got your hot chocolate, or whatever fuels your greatness. All right, let's go. All right, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Here we go. Once upon a time, there's a beautiful little town called Hamelin. The people of Hamelin were all happy until the day the rats came. Oops, moving too fast. Until the day the rats came. All right, bear with me. Thousands of rats came to Hamelin. There were big rats and little rats, thin rats and fat rats. There were rats in all the houses and rats in all the shops. There are rats at my table, said one man. There are rats under my chair, said another. There are rats in my kitchen, called one woman. There are rats in my bed, called another. Does it sound familiar? Are we in organizations where we feel like we're dealing with rats every day? Or even in our personal lives? Are we dealing with a lot of rats? I'm not going to go there. There are rats all over the house, called the little boy. Make these rats go away, called the little girl. Everybody needs some help. The people of Hamlin went to see the mayor, the leader, right? The mayor. Get rid of these rats, they shouted. What can I do? Said the mayor. You heard what the leader said? What can I do? There are rats in my house too. The leader's dealing with some of the same problems all the people are. I can't get rid of them. But the people said, you must make all the rats go away. If you don't make them go away, we will choose another mayor. Sounds familiar? Then one day a stranger went to see the mayor. He was dressed in red and yellow. In his hand he carried a pipe. I am the Pied Piper, he said, and I can make the rats go away. The mayor said, if you can make these rats go away, I will give you lots of money. Very well, said the Pied Piper, but don't forget your promise. Then the Pied Piper went into the streets of Hamlin and began to play a strange tune. The rats heard the tune and stopped what they were doing. Suddenly, one rat ran after the Pied Piper. Then another rat ran after the Pied Piper, and another, and soon all the rats ran after the Pied Piper. The Pied Piper walked towards the river, still playing the magical tune on his pipe. The rats followed him and jumped into the river, and that was the end of the rats. The Pied Piper went back to see the mayor. The rats have all gone, he said. Please give me my money as you promised. No, said the mayor. I have no money to give you. Not nice. If you don't give me the money, said the Pied Piper, I will play another tune and you will not be happy then. Threats, right? Is it a blind threat? Let's see. You can do what you like, said the mayor. So the Pied Piper went into the streets and began to play another tune. In all the houses, in all the streets, the children stopped playing. Then one by one, they ran after the Pied Piper. The people of Hamlin called to the children to stop, but the children didn't hear. They followed the Pied Piper through the streets and over the river. They followed the Pied Piper out of the town and up on a mountain. Suddenly, the mountain opened up and the Pied Piper went inside. The children followed him inside the mountain. The mountain was a beautiful land full of trees and flowers and birds. But one little boy had hurt his leg and he couldn't keep up with the other children. He saw his friends going to the mountain, but he was too late to follow them. The little boy went back to the town and went to see the mayor. My friends are inside the mountain with the Pied Piper, he said. They will never come back. The people of Hamlin were very unhappy. Where are our children? They shouted to the mayor. You must go and find them. So the mayor went to look for the children. He looked for years and years and years. He is still looking for them now. Interesting, huh? Interesting. So many lessons about leadership here. So many lessons about leadership here. This is one of my favorite tales, and I actually do use that as an analogy often. If you don't have the Pied Piper effect in an organization, you are going to have some issues, right? As leaders, we need to have that kind of influence that the Pied Piper have. So what are some of the lessons? And by the way, some of the cautionary lessons that could be learned from the Pied Piper story. Let's dig into leader influence for just a little bit. I want to talk more about this idea that a leader has to have influence. A leader has to have influence. If you don't have influence, you can't move people in the direction that you're trying to take them, right? The tale of the Pied Piper is often told more of, from a cautionary standpoint about the consequences of broken promises. You heard the mayor promised to pay him and didn't pay him, which, by the way, as a leader, when you make promises to your people, you better keep them. And if you don't keep them, you better find out ways that you can make sure that you're transparent and you're communicating as to why it's not happening. Okay? Note number one. But beneath the surface of that story, there are all these metaphors for leadership and influence, right? The Pied Piper wasn't truly a leader. He had no title. He had no authority. Yet, at the sound of his pipe, his influence, and at the sound of the pipe, you heard me say that? At the sound of his influence, right? The pipe, the influence was in that pipe. He led an entire town's children away. First, he used it for good. And he led the rats away. Which, by the way, I could go into a whole nother story about how that story just sort of seems very metaphoric too, about some of our organizations and how many rats we're dealing with in the organizations, right? And how we're going to address some of those. But that's for another episode, right? He led all the town's children away. The story not only illustrates just the immense potential, but also the ethical pitfalls that lies in leadership and influence. So let's just unpack this through a more modern lens and through the lens of our everyday workplace. Leadership without influence. You know how they say faith without works is dead? Leadership without influence is dead. Leadership without influence is dead. And influence without authority happens every single day in our organization. It's the charisma. It's the ability of someone to move the team in the right direction, right? That team member who rallies the entire team to get the job done, right? Or the inspiring teacher in a classroom who draws those students into learning with passion because they just are innovating all day long. And at the sound of their voice, the kids are just ready to get into their classrooms because of the innovation that's happening in the classroom, right? The confidence and the ability to find solutions that people can relate to, solutions that people will buy into. Because if you're producing results for the people, that is also another one of those ways that you can continue to build your influence. So true leadership is not about a title, but about the ability to inspire action. You must be able to inspire action if you are a leader. And if you're not inspiring action in your workplace, then I will challenge your leadership all day long. It's about convincing others to believe in your vision or the vision of the organization or the vision that you've created together, and then to follow willingly, right? Leaders who rely slowly on authority to move people, you're not achieving any kind of real growth. All you're achieving is compliance. And the moment your people don't feel like complying anymore, that's when you're going to start to have issues. But leaders who wield influence in a good way, they can spark engagement and loyalty to the goals of the organization, loyalty to the work that needs to get done, and they take it personal. They take it personal. But I don't want us to ever forget the ethical dilemma that also lies in that story. Here we have a Pied Piper, right, whose influence was undeniable, remarkable influence. His story just, however, takes this dark turn because now he is using his influence, right, to move an entire town of children out from under their parents into another setting, right? And while you may also say that the unethical behaviors began with the mayor who broke his promise, did not do and follow through on what he said he was going to do. We can go on all kind of angles because there's all kinds of unethical behaviors here. But we're just going to go with the Pied Piper for a minute because he's the one with the remarkable influence that as leaders we all aspire to have. He used his influence to extract vengeance, right? To take revenge by leading the children away. And this serves as a reminder that leadership without ethics can also lead to destruction. Leadership without ethics, or leader influence rather, without ethics can lead to destruction. So taking it back to today, right? My question for you is, do you use your influence to uplift others, or do you use it to serve your own agenda? It's an important question to ask as a leader. Do you use your influence to uplift others, or are you using it to serve your own agenda? Are you transparent about your intentions? Are you being honest with your team? Are you sharing with them the struggles? Are you sharing with them the problems that you're trying to find solutions for? And by the way, you might be just surprised how many solutions come from the team that you are leading. Don't ever underestimate the power of group thinking, of getting people into a room together and having conversations and throwing things against the wall and seeing what truly sticks. Don't ever underestimate that. Because you are the leader and you're the one in authority and you're the one with title does not mean you have the answers. I hope you know that. I hope you know that just because you are the one with the title, you do not always have the answer. And if you rely on the team around you, you'll realize very quickly that it's important to make sure that you're involving all the others. Another danger in the story that we see in leadership all the time, right, is the danger of overpromise and underdelivering. The town of Hamlin, broke its promise to the Pied Piper. The mayor broke his promise to the Pied Piper. And this breach of trust is what led to the catastrophic, situation where the Pied Piper was able to lead the entire town's children into this mountain, right? So overpromising, underdelivering can lead to some catastrophic results for you as a leader. So as a leader, when you overpromise and underdeliver, not only are you losing credibility, right, but you are also reducing your influence. You're losing credibility with your people, and credibility and influence, or lack thereof, hand in hand, right? No credibility, no influence. So some of the key takeaways from you today: follow through on your commitments. It's important that as a leader, if you promise to make the change, ensure it happens. Follow through on your commitments with your people, with your team, with your staff, right? If you say you're going to do it, do it. We use this phrase all the time in the real world. Your word is your bond. That happens in leadership also. Now we know things happen. And this is why one of the key takeaways is also to communicate honestly. Because if there's something that has changed the dynamic of the situation, the dynamic of the organization, it's important that you communicate that with your team. They need to know. People are human beings. You might be surprised just how understanding people might be. You might be surprised how much they might even have a solution to help you with the problem. People are humans too. Your staff, your team, they're humans too, is what I meant to say, right? They're humans too. And you would be surprised to see how when you openly and honestly communicate with your team, that sometimes, even if you can't follow through with the commitments, you get a lot of grace from your staff when they know that if you could have followed through on that, you absolutely will, because it's what you do. Because in previous, your word was always your bond. And this time, or these couple of times when you can't follow through because of situations that you have no control of, or even situations that you have control of, but you have to go in another direction, you have to pivot. And for that reason, what you promised last month is not going to happen this month. It's important for you to communicate honestly, because what does this do? The other takeaway, it cultivates trust. Right? Influence is strongest when it's built on a foundation of reliability and integrity. So don't forget that. So my question for you today, at the sound of my voice, or if you're watching this podcast, is what is your role in building trust and communication and openness with your team? Are you doing a great job at it? Are you doing a good job at creating that kind of influence where people are willing to walk through big doors just for you? I've always said, if you've never had one of your team members say, "I'll do it just for you," then I will challenge your influence, right? Because not everything that you roll out for the team is going to be something they agree with. Some things may be coming to you from upper management that you have no control over. So you may not have a control over the decision. You may have control over how you make it happen. But some things are just out of your control. But you just need your team to trust that it's in the best interest. Trust that maybe they don't have all the information that you do, but they just have to, trust you in that process, right? So I want you to remember that some of the key takeaways here is that follow through on your commitments, honestly communicate with your team, and that will absolutely build trust. The other point I want to make today is, let's talk about leading beyond the pipe, right? Another lesson from the Pied Piper. Imagine if the Pied Piper had chosen to use his influence to teach others how to play the pipe and have the same kind of impact that he did, right? Rather than keeping that power to himself. Just imagine that. He could have created a legacy, right, of shared skills and collective problem solving. He could have taught other people in the city of Hamelin to do exactly what he did. Now let's imagine that after all this happened, part 2 to the story was that the rats returned, right? Let's just imagine right away. Let's say the rats came back right away. Nobody in that city could do what he did. So another lesson for leadership here is that it's important for you to succession plan. We say it all the time and we put it on paper, but do we truly focus on that? So another lesson for us is 1, how do you lead behind the pipe? Empower others to do the same things that you can do so you can grow. I like to call it expand your sphere of influence. So now that it's not just you are the only one with the tools and the skills to get these results, but you have other members on your team who can do the same. And then, of course, a big plus of doing that is that you'll have somebody, in case the Pied Piper never returns and the same problem emerges again, then you have someone on your team, on your staff, who can be a problem solver and who has the skills necessary to take care of that. So what's the takeaway here again? Mentor and develop future leaders on your team. Share your knowledge, share your skills. Share your knowledge, share your skills. You're not a leader if you're not teaching people how to do the things that you can do well. As leaders, a lot of times, we're the one doing all the work. The person doing all the work and doing all the talking is the one doing all the learning and all the growing. No, you have to empower your team and empower members of your team to do the things that you can do and to have the same kind of influence, because that is how you're going to grow as an organization. Not only in doing so are you growing people individually, but you're also fostering collaboration. Right? You're working together, because when you teach that one, that person is supposed to teach another person. So you're fostering collaboration. You're having people come together and work on problems, right? And they're walking away better for having had that conversation, for having had that experience. And you're also creating a culture of trust where individuals realize that, 1, you have their best interest at heart. And you want to see them grow. You want to see them develop. You want to see them become great leaders, no matter what level of the organization that they're at. Okay. So from the modern leader's pipe lens, in today's world, every leader must be able to identify their unique pipe. What's your pipe? What is your unique tool or skill that allows you to inspire and lead others? Drop it in the chat. Drop it in the comment section, right? What is your pipe? I like to say mine is transparency, because it builds trust, right? It builds empathy, transparency. There is very little that I go through in life, personal or professional, that other people have not been through. But as leaders, we tend to put up this block because we must be perfect, right? We have this idea that we can share, certain things with our staff. We all know there are boundaries to everything, right? So I'm not speaking generally like that, but I'm saying when you are transparent about a lot of things, you find that what you're doing is building trust. People are realizing that you are human too. Because sometimes they tend to think that as the person with the title at the top of the organization, you're not human, right? Because you have it all perfect. And for that reason, they don't think that you can empathize or you understand the situations that they're going through. So my question is to you, what is your pipe? What is it that you use to inspire others? What it is that you use to lead others? And many of us have many pipes, right? I say transparency. Mine is also my relationships. I'm a great relationship builder. What is yours, right? So, and again, all of these things, a lot of times they're intertwined. But when you are able to inspire others to move in the direction you're trying to move them, that's a great sign that you're doing what you're supposed to do and that you are developing the skill sets that you need to do as a leader, right? For some people, it's the communication skills. For some people, it's their ability to develop strategic vision and their ability to foster deep, emotional connections with people. Whatever it is. Drop yours, like I said, in the comment section. Let me hear what your modern day pipe. Some people call it, what's your superpower, right? What's your modern day? What is your modern day pipe, tongue twister, in your organization? Because the key here is to be able to wield your pipe responsibly. That's the key, to be able to use it responsibly, and understanding that your influence has the power to shape not just actions, but also the culture and the morale of those you lead. Right? So Remember the Pied Piper? One of my favorites, by the way. One of my very, very, very favorites. If you haven't read that in a while, go read it. And think through all of the lessons for leaders that are sitting right there. All right. The last thing I want to talk about today is, and we touched on it a little bit because we talked about title versus, the leader versus the title, right? The position. Now, picture this. Do you know someone in a leadership role? It could be your CEO. It could be a VP, a principal, maybe even your own boss, right? Or yourself, because we want to be very self-reflective on this podcast. We want to look in the mirror before we look outside the window. Look in the mirror before you look outside the window. And it may be you. You may be the figurative leader. Now ask yourself the question, do you truly inspire others? Do you make them, like I said, want to run, through walls to achieve the vision that have been set? Or are you just holding the position, collecting the paycheck and doing, what's expected? What kind of leader are you? What kind of leader are you? I want you to question that. I want you to be introspective, and I want you to think through that. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone with a title is a leader. In fact, on the contrary, sometimes it's the people without the title in your organization that exhibit the kind of influence that as leaders we all aspire to have. Sometimes it's the team leader, the team person, or, the front office person who has the ability to rally people around, a project and get them to stay late and, finish the project. It could be the teacher who ignites the staff, or even better, because this is just kind of, my heart, a little bit of my heart. That teacher who ignites, students to believe in themselves and know that they can achieve, or that volunteer who takes charge, right, when chaos erupts and makes sure that everything ends just right. Leadership is about action and influence. It's not about title and position. So don't forget that. You can have the title, you can have the paycheck. It does not make you a leader. It does not make you a leader. So what are some of the lessons that we learned, again, from all of this? Leader influence. And I'm going to share a personal story that for me was an example of something like this. So I shared the fable story, right? The Pied Piper. I'm going to share a personal story because this truly happened to me. When I was a principal, quick story. This is what you call like real raw in the trenches leadership. All right. Real raw in the trenches. There was a teacher on staff. I'm going to call her Miss X for now. I know once you hear the story, anybody who's been on that campus know exactly who I'm talking about, and she's gonna laugh. She's gonna laugh when she hears that she's retired, and I hope she's listening. I may have to invite her on for a future podcast so we can talk, because boy, those were the days. She was amazing. I'll tell you that. The woman was amazing. No, let me rephrase that. The woman was phenomenal. When I tell you somebody who could take students and connect with them and grow them as far as their learning is concerned, that was that woman. That was Miss X. That's what I'm going to call her for now, right? In the classroom, she was just amazing. She was no nonsense. I'll tell you that. And the kids knew it. But when it came to learning and when it came to kids knowing that she cared about them, that was her. When I tell you this woman was difficult, she was a pain in my, she was difficult. The woman was so difficult. She was that one because this passion she had, right, knows no boundaries. So while she's passionate about her classroom, she was also passionate about the entire staff, and she could get them riled up in a heartbeat. You say something, you're going to do something, and all of a sudden it doesn't sit right with her. It's not what she wants to do. She would get the entire staff riled up about this. And while it was not necessarily toxic, it was loud. It was passionate, right? Oh, maybe sometimes it was a little toxic, right? But for the most part, it was more about just being loud and, passion and disruptive. It was disruptive. I'll use that word instead of using the word toxic, because this is somebody who believed in what she stood for, and she wasn't afraid to let everybody know, and she was going to fight for it. And because of her influence, even though she doesn't have the title, I tell you, those teachers would align and all hell would break loose, right? So the challenge for me was to figure out, how do I reel this in? How do I use this lady, not as a curse, but as a blessing, right? Because leaders like her can be both a blessing and a challenge. On one hand, they have that kind of influence that can unite people. They can inspire action. They can fuel a mission. You want the work done and you put her at the head of that work or that project, it's going to get done. But on the other hand, that influence can feel like a wild card. It's something that you have to figure out how to direct rather than how to control. Because if I tried to steamroll her, that was the end of that. And I couldn't ignore her either. She was just another member of the staff, but she was a force to reckon with because of her influence. And I was going to have to figure out how to lead her, and I had to meet her where she was. So for me, I had to take sort of like an unorthodox approach to bringing her on, because she would go to bat for teachers in a minute. Now, you know, I love me some teachers, right? You know, I love y'all. But as they say, not all humans are created equal. Not all teachers are created equal. And that's a fact, right? So while from an administrative perspective, I had to be accountable to students for what teachers were doing in the classroom. From Miss X's perspective, it was more about, why are you harassing teachers or a teacher? Or why are you implementing an initiative that we don't agree with? Or why are we doing this? Because in her mind, every teacher was her. Every teacher exhibited the same level of passion, the same level of commitment, had the same level of skill. Because sometimes it's not that teachers don't want to do the work, they don't know how. They don't know how. And as a leader, it's important for you also to recognize which one it is. You always say, listen, I can teach you skills, I can't teach you motivation, right? Because if you're motivated to try to figure it out, I can help you get there. So she thought everybody was her. She thought every classroom on my campus functioned the way she did. I wanted to say to her, well, if that was the case, we'd be getting results, test score results, the same as yours, if that was the case. But, you know, she's not paying to the attention to the obvious. So what did I have to do? All right. I implemented for the first time on that campus. It's not a new strategy, but this team did not do that. Instructional rounds where teachers would observe each other's classrooms. All right. This was my way of trying to get her into other people's classrooms so that when I speak of some of the initiatives or things we need to do to grow, get better, grow people, she would have more empathy for the administrative approach to getting the work done. Did the instructional rounds, prior to the rounds, I had to say to her, Miss X, not everybody is you. Not everybody teach like you. Not everybody care about children like you. And this is so sad because in the educational system, I think we all know this. We don't say it out loud often enough, but we know that there are some inequities in how these things happen in classrooms. It's just a fact, right? And I had to say that to her. But when I took it to the next step and actually took her into the classroom, hallelujah, right? She finally realized what I was talking about. Now, I may not have brought her all the way to the other side, but I at least positioned her to be a little bit more neutral in terms of her approach and her response to things that we had to do as far as initiatives to move children and to move, academic growth and to get academic growth from kids, and the work we had to do with holding teachers accountable, right? So again, sometimes you got to sneak it in. You sneak it in however you can sneak it in, because that was a pivotal and a turning point. And there are people that she thought were just knocking it out of the ballpark in the classroom. And when she was able to walk in and see what they did, it was a different sort of response. But it also positioned me to recruit her to mentor other teachers, right? And she happily did too, by the way, because again, she has such passion for kids, for children, and she wanted to see all kids walking on that campus do well, not just hers, But in that moment, I was able to leverage that experience to make sure that I could get her now to tap into and own. In fact, she owned a couple of teachers after that whole situation, owned a couple of teachers. And it's so funny because later on she would complain to me about the work she had to do. Not in a negative way, but I shouldn't use the word complain. She would talk about, just all of what she had to do to make sure that they were doing what they had to do. It's a lot of work. That is the power of influence. When I tell you, when you have influence around you through your staff, your team members, don't consider it a threat. Use it as a tool, right? It's not a threat. It's a tool. Don't feel threatened, because I know what we do sometimes as leaders. You get rid of the persons, but you have to think about what they're bringing to the table as well. What are they bringing to the table that you can use to grow your staff, your team, right? The organization. Do they bring something positive that you can harness? And then on top of that, use their influence to create greater impact amongst the team. Her influence could have easily been a roadblock for me as a leader, but instead, no, I chose to channel it. Empowered her to see the bigger picture, and in doing so, she became even more of a stronger ally for me. The unorthodox approach does work. So leadership is not always about following all the rule books, right? It's not about following the rule book. It's about understanding people, meeting them where they are, and finding creative ways to get them on board. That's what it's really about. So leaders don't always just sit at the top of the table. They don't just always sit at the top of the org chart. This teacher had no title. She had no title. At some point in her tenure, she might have been a department head, but this story is not centered around any of that. She had no title, but she was a leader in her own right, and her influence with the staff was stronger than any directive I could give them. Any directive. So I started to rely on her to push the message along, right? So remember, influence is not a threat. It's a tool. Use it as a tool. Harness it for the greater good. And think about some unorthodox approaches you might use to get that influence happening in the right direction, right? Moving in the right direction. And just remember, many leaders on your team are not you. They're not you. You have leaders on your team that you can use their influence and their command of people and their relationships to get the work done. So, in reflecting, the story of the Pied Piper and my teacher's reminder, both of the potential and also of the perils of influence, right? Don't forget that. We saw it in the mayor of Hamlin. We saw it in the Pied Piper who, whilst he was wronged, right, went ahead and led all the children out of the city, never to be seen again. Okay? And by the way, just a little nugget. If you're not a great leader with great influence, let's talk about the fact that the Pied Piper could lead people away, never to be seen again. Many of you are losing staff because you don't have these skills, because you're not building great relationships with your people, because you don't have the kind of influence. You lose your people because they go to the individual who has that influence. There's a little bit of nugget there as well. I'm not speaking anything that you don't already know, but sometimes it just needs to be said out loud. So like the Pied Piper and the teacher, right? They both had influence. They have the ability to lead people towards extraordinary outcomes. So the question is, will you lead the people that you serve today towards a brighter future, or just into the shadows of the mountain? What are you doing? Brighter future, or into a mountain, the door closes, never to be seen again, right? Are you leading the organization into the ground because you don't have a positive influence on your team to get the work done and make sure it happens? That's number 2. Great leaders use their influence to also empower others and leave a legacy of trust and growth, right? Are you one of those leaders who, whilst you have this gift, this pipe, right, that you are using, and you have to be able to identify what your pipe is. What is your pipe? What is your pipe? You have to know what your pipe is. But are you also going further and using your pipe to empower others, not only for the purpose of the obvious succession planning, but also for the purpose of growing your people, inspiring them to be better, growing their skill sets, nurturing them, and ensuring that others in the organization can do the work that you do and create a lasting impact by doing so, because none of us are anywhere forever. Just remember that, right? So what is your pipe, and how will you use your pipe to create a positive and a lasting impact for your people? Remember, influence is a two-edged sword. It can unite or it can divide. It can build or it can break. It can inspire or it can intimidate. So as leaders, our job is to harness it, to take the wild, untamed energy of influencers and shape that into something powerful, productive, and positive for the organization. Let me say that again. Influence can be a two-edged sword, right? It is your responsibility to take that wild, untamed energy of those who can influence on your team. If it's not you, right? The ideal is to make sure you as the leader has that ability, but don't ignore the others on your team that also have that ability to influence, right? And use those positive things for the good of the group. This teacher taught me more than I could ever teach her, right? And so did the Pied Piper. Taught me more than I could ever teach her, right? She showed me that leadership isn't about silencing voices. That's not what it's about. In too many organizations, that's what you want to do, is silence the voices because they're loud. Well, how about you ignore the voice and just listen to the message, because sometimes there's something there for you to take away, and there's something there for you to use for the betterment of the organization. Try that. Try ignoring the person, the voice, and listen to the message, because in a lot of times there's a message there. And instead of trying to silence them, let's go ahead and take those influencers and let's go ahead and amplify their voices for the right time, for the right reasons, right? For the good of the organization. And sometimes that will take a little bit of humility. It will take a little bit of you stepping back. It will take a little bit of creativity, and it will take a lot of bravery. Because it means that you are going to sit back or step back. It means that you're going to step off your title throne for a minute and hand over the banner to somebody else, right? Who can get the work done and move people in the direction that you want them to go, right? How about you today commit to telling somebody, I see your strength. Let me help you use that for the greater good. I see that you have the ability. I see that you have the skills. Let me go ahead and help you use that to move us in the right direction, and in doing so, to grow you as well as a leader. So to all the leaders out there, when you encounter someone with influence, right? So while we are working on building our own repertoire of skills that will help us have influence and develop that kind of rapport with people, where they will walk through brick walls for you and they will move in the direction that you're trying to move them to. If you encounter individuals with influence, don't shy away from them. Don't see them as a threat, right? But instead see them for what they are. They could be a gift. They could be the answer to that problem that you're trying to solve, right? A challenge, make no mistake, a challenge, but yes, a gift nonetheless. And remember, leadership is about direction, not domination. Influence, when nurtured and directed, can be the most powerful tool in your leadership arsenal. Influence, when nurtured and directed, can be the most powerful tool in your leadership arsenal. And maybe, just maybe, it takes an unorthodox approach to make it all come together. With that said, I'm so glad you're able to join me. I hope you got something out of this today. Tune in, follow on all of your social media platforms, share, like, subscribe, share, encourage others to tune in as well. And if there's a particular topic that you want to see me talk about, you go ahead and drop that in the comments as well, and we'll see how we can talk about that in future. I look forward to seeing you again. Have a great rest of your day, evening, night, no matter where you are. And just remember, great leadership is about inspiring others to be the best that they can be. Because when they are, the organization also benefits. Ciao. Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Plus with Dr. G.